On the morning of March 27, 1995, Maurizio Gucci walked out of his apartment in Milan and headed toward his office. It was only a short walk, past the public gardens, across the kind of polished, elegant streets where Italian wealth hides in plain sight. Maurizio was dressed like the man he had been raised to become. A suit, a tie, Gucci loafers. The name on his shoes was the same name on his bloodline. He had been born into one of the most famous fashion families in the world. He had lived inside villas, boardrooms, private clubs, family lawsuits, and rooms where a single signature could move millions. But that morning, none of it protected him. As he climbed the steps at 20 Via Palestro, a man came up behind him. The first shots hit Maurizio in the back and shoulder. He turned, he fell onto the marble entrance. Then, the gunman stepped closer and fired again. The heir to Gucci died outside his own office before the workday had even begun. At first, the murder looked like a business killing. That made sense. Maurizio Gucci had enemies. He had money. He had lawsuits behind him. He had relatives who hated him. He had investors who had fought him. And he had spent years inside one of the most toxic family empires in Europe. The Gucci name meant glamour to the world. But behind the double G logo was a dynasty rotting from the inside. Brothers betrayed brothers. Nephews destroyed uncles. Fathers disowned sons. Lawyers became more useful than relatives, and the woman who once called herself Mrs. Gucci would become known by another name, the Black Widow. This is the story of the Gucci family murder that destroyed a billion-dollar empire. And it begins far from the runway. Not in Milan, not in Paris, not in a marble boutique on Fifth Avenue. It begins in a hotel lobby in London. Long before the Guccio Gucci name appeared on handbags, loafers, belts, sunglasses, perfumes, and red carpets, it belonged to a young Florentine man named Guccio Gucci. Guccio was born in Florence in 1881. He did not begin life as an aristocrat. He was not born into a palace. He did not inherit a fashion house. As a young man, he left Italy and went to London, where he worked at the Savoy Hotel. The Savoy was not an ordinary hotel. It was a world stage for aristocrats, industrialists, socialites, and travelers who moved through Europe with polished trunks and servants following behind. Guccio watched them arrive. He watched the way luggage was handled. He watched the confidence of people who never questioned whether a door would be opened for them. And he studied the objects they carried: leather trunks, saddles, travel cases, bags that were not just practical, but symbolic. To ordinary people, luggage was something you used. To the wealthy, luggage was proof that you belonged somewhere. Guccio understood that luxury was not really about need. It was about recognition. A person did not buy an expensive bag simply because it held clothes. They bought it because it told the world who they were. When Guccio returned to Florence, he carried that lesson with him. In 1921, he opened a small leather shop on Via della Vigna Nuova. The shop sold luggage, leather goods, and riding equipment. It was elegant but not yet legendary. There was no global empire, no celebrity obsession, no murder, just a shop in Florence built around craftsmanship and aspiration. But Guccio had seen the future. What Guccio understood early was that luxury needed a story before it needed scale. Florence already had artisans. Italy already had leather workers. But Guccio wrapped those skills in an image of travel, class, and belonging. A riding crop was not merely a riding crop. A suitcase was not merely a suitcase. A handbag was not merely a container. Every object carried a suggestion that its owner moved through a more refined world. That was the original Gucci promise. Not loud wealth. Quiet recognition. The kind of recognition that did not need to explain itself. He knew that the wealthy wanted objects that made them feel distinct, and he knew Italy could produce them beautifully. The timing helped him. The early 20th century was changing how elites traveled. Cars, trains, ocean liners, and later airplanes, made movement part of status. Travel itself became glamorous. A well-made suitcase became a kind of passport into privilege. Gucci built its early reputation around that world. The materials were refined, the craftsmanship was careful, the image was exclusive, and slowly, the name began to matter. But the first great mistake of the Gucci dynasty was that it became a family business. That sounds harmless. It even sounds romantic. A founder, his sons, a shared name, a shared legacy. But family businesses carry a hidden danger. The company becomes more than a company. It becomes inheritance. It becomes identity. It becomes proof of who matters most. Guccio brought his sons into the business. Aldo, Rodolfo, Vasco, and Ugo. Each man carried the Gucci name, but each man wanted something different from it. At first, the family worked together well enough to grow. Gucci expanded from Florence to Rome, Milan, and eventually beyond Italy. Aldo Gucci in particular had the instincts of a born merchant. He understood showmanship. He understood expansion. He understood that luxury needed both quality and mythology. Under the sons, Gucci moved into the international world. A boutique opened in New York. Then came a presence in Beverly Hills. Hollywood noticed. Movie stars noticed. Royalty noticed. The brand began attaching itself to women whose photographs traveled around the world. Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, Jackie Kennedy. One handbag became so closely associated with Jackie Kennedy that it would eventually be remembered simply as the Jackie. That is what old money brands dream of. Aldo's genius was that he understood America. In Europe, luxury often came from age and tradition. In America, luxury could be created through celebrity and visibility. Aldo knew that if the right actress carried the right bag, the image could travel farther than any advertisement. He treated boutiques almost like theaters. The lighting mattered, the service mattered, the feeling of being admitted into something mattered. A customer was not just buying leather, they were buying a scene, and for a while that scene worked beautifully. But the strategy also created temptation. The more valuable the name became, the more everyone wanted to put it on something. Perfumes, scarves, accessories, licensed goods. Some of those products made money, but they also risked making Gucci feel common. The brand that had been built on exclusivity was being stretched in too many directions. That tension would haunt the company for years. Not just sales, association. A product stops being a product and becomes part of a life people want to imagine for themselves. By the 1960s, Gucci was no longer merely selling leather goods. It was selling entry into a private world. The double G became a symbol. The horse-bit loafer became a signal. The bamboo handlebag became proof that scarcity could be turned into style. And the family behind the company became very rich. But the richer the Guccis became, the more dangerous the company became to them. Because everyone in the family believed the name belonged to them. Aldo believed he had built the international empire. Rodolfo believed his branch had equal claim. The next generation believed they deserved recognition, and no one wanted to be treated like a secondary Gucci. The public saw polished boutiques. Inside the family, the atmosphere was suspicion. Every expansion raised a question. Who controlled it? Every profit raised another. Who deserved it? Every decision carried insult. Who was ignored? This is how dynasties begin to fail, not usually with one disaster, but with years of small humiliations. A brother who thinks he is owed more. A nephew who believes he is being dismissed. A father who decides his son is weak. A wife who thinks the family will never accept her. In the Gucci family, those humiliations accumulated like debt. And eventually, they came due. One of the first major family wars centered around Paolo Gucci. Paolo was Aldo Gucci's son. He wanted to be seen as creative, important, and modern. But inside the family, Paolo was often treated as difficult. He believed he had ideas that could move Gucci forward. Others believed he threatened the brand. That conflict became explosive when Paolo tried to create his own line, using the Gucci name. To Paolo, it may have felt like independence. To the family, it felt like theft. Because in a dynasty, the family name is sacred only until someone tries to use it without permission. The lawsuits began. The shouting became public. The humiliation deepened, and Paolo responded with the weapon that would wound his own father. He helped expose Aldo Gucci's tax problems. In 1986, Aldo Gucci, the man who had helped turn the company into a global luxury empire, was sentenced to prison for tax evasion. It was a stunning fall. Aldo had spent his life building the aura of Gucci. Now he was a convicted man. And the betrayal had come from inside his own bloodline. That was the Gucci pattern. No rival could damage the family as effectively as the family itself. While Aldo's branch was tearing itself apart, another Gucci was rising. Maurizio Gucci. Maurizio was the only son of Rodolfo Gucci. Rodolfo had once been an actor before devoting himself to the family company. He was protective, strict, and deeply suspicious of outsiders. Maurizio grew up in privilege, but also in the shadow of a powerful father and an even more powerful name. He was not the loudest Gucci. He did not seem like the most ruthless, but he would become the man whose choices ended family control of the empire. And one of those choices began at a party. In the early 1970s, Maurizio met Patrizia Reggiani. She was beautiful, confident, and socially ambitious. She did not come from the old aristocratic world that the Guccis liked to imagine around themselves. But she wanted that world intensely. Patrizia understood status. She understood rooms. She understood how to enter a circle and make people notice. Maurizio was captivated. His father was horrified. Rodolfo reportedly believed Patrizia was not right for his son. He feared she was interested in money, not love. He saw her as a social climber, but Maurizio ignored him. In 1972, Maurizio married Patrizia, and with that marriage, Patrizia stepped inside the Gucci dynasty. For her, the name changed everything. She was no longer simply Patrizia Reggiani. She was Mrs. Gucci. That title came with apartments, cars, jewelry, servants, parties, yachts, and access. But more than anything, it came with identity. Patrizia did not merely enjoy being rich. She seemed to enjoy being recognized as rich. There is a difference. Money buys comfort. Recognition buys power. As Maurizio and Patrizia settled into married life, their world became one of extreme luxury. They moved between homes in Milan, New York, and resort towns. They had 2 daughters. They entertained, they shopped, they appeared to live the dream version of a European luxury marriage. But inside the Gucci family, Patrizia remained controversial. Some relatives saw her as intrusive. Some saw her as ambitious. Some believed she encouraged Maurizio to reach for control. And perhaps they were right, because after Rodolfo Gucci died in 1983, everything changed. Maurizio inherited his father's enormous stake in the company. Suddenly, he was no longer merely a young heir with a famous surname. He was a power center, a man whose shares could decide the future of Gucci. And Patrizia was beside him. From that moment, the family war became even more dangerous. Maurizio began maneuvering against other relatives. He wanted authority. He wanted control. He wanted to reshape the company. The older generation had spent decades building Gucci as a family empire. Maurizio began acting like the family itself was the problem. In some ways, he may have been right. By the 1980s, Gucci was no longer the perfectly controlled symbol of elegance it had once been. Licensing had spread the name widely. Counterfeits were everywhere. The brand risked becoming overexposed. The family fights were distracting management. The company had glamour, but it was losing discipline. Maurizio believed Gucci needed to be saved, but saving it meant pushing other Guccis out, and that made him enemies. Boardrooms became battlefields. The family name became evidence in lawsuits. Relatives who had once posed for photographs together now communicated through attorneys. And the world watched the Gucci family turn itself into a spectacle. There was something almost operatic about it. The products were beautiful, the people were wealthy, the settings were elegant, but the emotions were primitive. Jealousy, greed, fear, pride, revenge. It was not a fashion story anymore. It was a family tragedy wearing designer clothing. While Maurizio fought for control of the company, his marriage was deteriorating. To the public, he and Patrizia still represented glamour. Behind closed doors, the relationship was colder, more strained, and increasingly unstable. Maurizio began pulling away. Patrizia felt it. And then, in 1985, he left. The way he left became part of the legend. Maurizio told Patrizia he was going on a short business trip. Instead, he sent someone else to inform her that the marriage was over. He would not be coming home. For Patrizia, the abandonment was more than heartbreak. It was humiliation. And humiliation is a dangerous emotion when it attaches itself to money. She had built her entire identity around being Mrs. Gucci. Now Maurizio was trying to separate her from the man, the marriage, and eventually the empire. But Patrizia did not let go easily. The separation also had a practical side. Divorce among ordinary people can become painful. Divorce inside a dynasty becomes financial warfare. There were homes to consider, allowances, assets, children, inheritance, public reputation, and Patrizia had grown used to a level of luxury that few people on earth ever experience. She was not moving from one normal life into another. She was watching the doors of a private universe begin to close. That made Maurizio's new relationship feel even more threatening. Paola Franchi was not simply a romantic rival. She was a sign that Patrizia's old life could be replaced. A new woman could live in the homes. A new woman could appear beside Maurizio. A new woman could become the future Mrs. Gucci. And if there is one thing Patrizia seemed unable to accept, it was the idea that the world could move on without her. She continued to use the Gucci name. She remained attached to the image. She remained attached to the money. And most importantly, she remained attached to the idea that something had been stolen from her. Over time, anger hardened into obsession. Maurizio moved on. He began a relationship with Paola Franchi, an elegant interior designer who had known him for years. To Patrizia, Paola was not just another woman. She was a replacement. She threatened the title Patrizia still believed belonged to her. She threatened the future. She threatened the inheritance Patrizia wanted protected for her daughters. And she represented the one thing Patrizia could not tolerate: being erased. At the same time, Maurizio made the decision that ended the Gucci dynasty as a family empire. He sold his stake. Investcorp, the Bahrain-based investment company, had already acquired a major part of Gucci. In 1993, it bought Maurizio's remaining shares. After more than 70 years, the Gucci family no longer controlled Gucci. The name remained on the boutiques. The products remained in the windows. The customers still walked in and bought the dream. But the family behind the dream had lost the company. That fact is crucial to understanding the tragedy. The Guccis had spent decades fighting for control. They had sued each other, betrayed each other, humiliated each other, and when the fighting was over, none of them had the empire. They had destroyed the family business while trying to possess it. Maurizio walked away with money, but he also walked away from the dynasty. For Patrizia, that did not feel like liberation. It felt like destruction. The title she had fought to keep was losing its meaning. The man who had left her was living with another woman. The company that made the name powerful had passed into outside hands, and the future she imagined was slipping away. This is where the Gucci story becomes darker, because Patrizia's anger did not remain private. She reportedly spoke openly about her hatred. She complained. She threatened. She told people she wanted Maurizio dead. Some may have dismissed it as drama, theatrical rage from a woman known for intensity. But words can become rehearsals. And eventually, prosecutors said, Patrizia stopped merely talking. She began looking for someone willing to act. One of the key figures around her was Giuseppina Auriemma, known as Pina. Pina was a friend, advisor, and psychic. That detail sounds almost fictional, but in the Gucci story, nothing was ever too strange. a murdered heir, an ex-wife with a title she refused to surrender, a psychic friend, a hired killer, a getaway driver. It all belonged to the same dark opera. Through intermediaries, prosecutors said, Patrizia arranged the killing of Maurizio Gucci. The hitman was Benedetto Ciraulo, a debt-ridden pizzeria owner. The getaway driver was Orazio Cicala. Others helped connect the pieces. The price of the murder was reported to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was an expensive crime. But everything in the Gucci world was expensive, even revenge. On March 27, 1995, Maurizio left his apartment shortly after 8:30 in the morning. He walked toward his office. According to reports, he seemed calm in the days before his death. He did not behave like a man expecting danger. That may be one of the most haunting details. Maurizio had spent years surrounded by conflict. But on the morning he was murdered, he did not appear to know the final threat was already waiting. He arrived at 20 Via Palestro. The doorman was there. The street was awake. Milan was beginning another day. Then the gunman approached. 2 shots first. Maurizio turned and fell. Then another shot. Then a final one. The assassin escaped. The doorman, Giuseppe Onorato, was also shot but survived. He would become one of the living witnesses to the last seconds of Maurizio Gucci's life. The murder stunned Italy. It had everything newspapers could not resist: money, fashion, a famous name, a broad daylight assassination, a beautiful ex-wife, a destroyed marriage, a dynasty already known for conflict. But for investigators, glamour did not solve the case. For nearly 2 years, the murder remained surrounded by suspicion and rumor. There were theories of organized crime, theories of business revenge, theories involving former associates. Maurizio had enough enemies that almost any explanation sounded possible. That was the problem. When a man spends years in legal and financial warfare, the list of suspects becomes crowded. But eventually, the investigation turned toward Patrizia. In 1997, she was arrested. So were the others accused of participating in the plot. The case became a national obsession. The Italian press called Patrizia the Black Widow. During the trial, Patrizia became almost as much a spectacle as the crime itself. She did not look like the public expected a murder suspect to look. She looked composed, elegant, expensive. Even the courtroom seemed unable to strip the glamour away from the story. Reporters studied her expressions. Photographers studied her outfits. The public studied her as if she were both defendant and performance. That was part of what made the case so disturbing. The crime was brutal, but the surroundings were polished. A killing, discussed in the language of alimony. A hitman, hidden behind fur coats, psychics, and private apartments. A widow who had once moved through Europe's luxury world, now sitting before judges while the name Gucci appeared in headlines for murder instead of fashion. The nickname stuck because it seemed to capture what the public wanted the story to be. A glamorous woman, a rich husband, a marriage turned deadly, a widow dressed in designer clothes. At trial, prosecutors argued that Patrizia had arranged the murder out of jealousy, resentment, and fear of losing money and status. The possible marriage between Maurizio and Paola Franchi mattered because it threatened Patrizia's position. If Maurizio remarried, Patrizia feared her financial arrangements and her daughter's inheritance could be affected. But the case was never only about money. Money was the visible part. Status was deeper. Patrizia did not just want income, she wanted recognition. She wanted the world to continue seeing her as Mrs. Gucci. Maurizio had taken that away in stages. First by leaving, then by loving someone else, then by selling the company, then by moving toward a future that did not include her. The prosecution presented a portrait of a woman who could not accept replacement. Patrizia denied ordering the murder, but the court did not believe her. In 1998, she was convicted and sentenced to 29 years in prison. 4 co-defendants were also convicted. The final image was almost impossible to reconcile with the Gucci myth. The family whose name had once represented handcrafted Italian elegance now ended in a murder conviction. The woman who had entered the dynasty through marriage left it through a prison sentence. And Maurizio, the last family figure with real power over Gucci, was gone. Yet the most astonishing part is what happened next. Gucci did not collapse, it revived. The family was gone. The brand survived. Under new management, Gucci became sharper, more focused, and more daring. Domenico De Sole helped stabilize the business side. Tom Ford transformed the image. The company became sleek, sexual, modern, and wildly profitable. The very things the family had failed to control became stronger without them. That is the brutal irony of the Gucci story. The dynasty thought it owned the name, but the name no longer needed the dynasty. The family had created the mythology, but outsiders learned how to monetize it better. Gucci became one of the great luxury comeback stories of the 1990s. The boutiques remained full. The products became desirable again. The brand entered a new age. And for the company, the timing was almost unreal. Just as the family story reached its darkest point, Gucci the brand was becoming desirable again. Tom Ford's vision turned the old house into something sharp and seductive. Velvet suits, low-cut dresses, glossy campaigns, a kind of dangerous glamour that felt perfectly suited to the 1990s. The public did not need the Gucci family anymore. It needed the Gucci fantasy, and the fantasy could be redesigned. That may be the coldest lesson in the entire story. Families believe they are irreplaceable because they carry the bloodline. But corporations do not need bloodlines. They need management, image, product, and timing. Once Gucci became more valuable as a brand than as a family inheritance, the family became almost unnecessary, and the people who had fought hardest over it were no longer inside the house. Aldo was disgraced. Paolo died broke. Maurizio was dead. Patrizia was in prison. The empire had survived by escaping the family that built it. Today, Gucci is still one of the most famous luxury brands in the world. People buy the bags, belts, shoes, and perfumes because they represent glamour. Most never think about the blood behind the name. They do not think about the hotel porter who dreamed of aristocratic luggage. They do not think about the brothers who expanded the company and then turned on each other. They do not think about Paolo betraying Aldo. They do not think about Maurizio selling away the last family control. They do not think about Patrizia writing herself into history, not as a glamorous wife, but as a convicted murderer. That is how luxury works. It polishes the surface until the violence underneath disappears. A boutique can smell like leather and perfume. A campaign can show beauty, youth, and desire. A logo can become so familiar that nobody asks what it cost. But every dynasty has a hidden ledger. The Gucci ledger was written in lawsuits, prison sentences, broken marriages, family exile, and murder. The founder built the company by understanding that people want to belong to a world above them. His descendants proved that belonging to that world could destroy you. Because the Gucci family did not fall, because the public stopped loving Gucci. It fell because the Guccis could not survive one another. The same name that made them rich made them suspicious. The same company that gave them status, gave them something to fight over. The same empire that looked elegant from the outside became unbearable from within. Sometimes a dynasty is not destroyed by poverty, or competition, or bad luck. Sometimes it is destroyed by inheritance, by the unbearable question of who deserves the name. Maurizio Gucci died on the steps of his office in 1995. But in many ways, the dynasty had been dying for years. Every lawsuit was a wound. Every betrayal was another fracture. Every family dinner carried the possibility of war. The murder was not the beginning of the collapse. It was the final, brutal symbol of it. The world saw a rich man killed in Milan. But the real story was larger. A family had built $1 billion empire out of status. Then it destroyed itself, trying to control the status it had created. Behind the elegance was envy. Behind the wealth was fear. Behind the logo was blood. And behind one of the most famous names in fashion was a family that proved the most dangerous enemy of any dynasty is often not outside the gates. It is already inside the house. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about wealth, power, betrayal, dynasties, and the families behind the world's most famous fortunes.